What is up, my YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then it's just welcome to my channel and now welcome back. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed unless, of course, you don't know a good thing when you see it. We all got a little something that's off about us, So, no shade. You guys, so I talked about this last night on my Instagram. Today's video, I've been working on all week. Oh my goodness. So about 2 weeks ago now, I came across African American folklore, which I did not know was a thing. And I enjoy a little piece of folklore, okay? I don't know how American folklore got past me, specifically African American folklore, but child, it did. I fell down this rabbit hole reading all of these stories, and when I tell you they were so good, I was like, I have to share this on my channel. So I chose 4 of my favorite from the list to share with you guys today. I'm going to read them to you, and I have put an animated visual with them as well. I'm so excited to share it with you. Like, I feel like the stories are just so good and it's so cool, and I feel like there is no better time than now because it's Black History Month. So without further ado, I'm going to read you the 4 stories. I want to know what you think about them. Let me know if you've heard them before. I want to know what your favorite ones are. I'm still trying to figure out which of the 4 is my favorite. It's so hard. But anyway, I'm about to get into it, tell y'all my thoughts about them as we go along, and I really hope you enjoy it. Let's go. So the first one is called the ClickBok tree. Many reigns ago, a mighty African king planted a ClickBok tree on the day his son was born. And for those of you who don't know, a ClickBok tree is an acorn tree. Over it, he prays and believes that the tree will protect his family in whatever ways that he could not. And she did. When the king died, his son buried him underneath the shade of the ClickBok tree so that even in death, the mighty king could protect his family. Whenever the son needed a spear, he would use the wood from the ClickBok tree and he would be protected from the lion and the tiger. Whenever the son went to battle, he would always trick his enemies back to the ClickBok tree where her low-hanging branches would entangle them, aiding him in winning his battles. With the help of the tree, the son becomes a mighty king himself. One day, strange-looking men come with powerful magic sticks that made lightning. The new young king tried to lure the men back to the ClickBok tree, but they wouldn't come. Instead, they captured his wife and his son. The king attacked the men with the fierceness of a tiger, but the sticks of lightning were too powerful. Just before his oldest son was taken away, the king gave him a single nut from the ClickBok tree and told him, "Plant this where you plant yourself." These were the last words the mighty king said to his son before he died. The strange-looking men took the king's oldest son across the ocean to a different land in chains to work as their slave on a large plantation in America, southern Alabama to be specific. The son did as his father told him. He planted the seed on the day his own son Z was born. He prayed over the seed and believed that the tree would protect his family. When Z's father dies, Z asked the taskmaster he works for if he could bury his father in the red Alabama clay dirt right underneath the shade of the ClickBok tree. And the taskmaster was such a mean old hateful so-and-so. He told Z no. And when he did, a heavy branch fell from the ClickBok tree and onto him, breaking his leg and crippling him for life. After that, he made things even harder for old Z. Every night, the taskmaster would find a reason to beat him until he bled, and if for some reason he couldn't beat him, he beat his wife instead. Z had made up in his mind to just up and run away one night, but then his wife said she was now pregnant with his son. And poor Z had to stick around now because being on the run was no place for a gal that was carrying a baby. When Youngin was born, that mean old taskmaster made Z's wife work the fields the very same day she'd given birth. She strapped her youngin on herself and went to work every day. When the taskmaster saw her with youngin, he yelled at her, "The fields ain't no place for no baby, and you didn't have enough time off having him, so you can't take him back. Put that baby in this old empty horse feeder and put him under that tree y'all love so much. That way he can't crawl off." Z's wife was afraid of a beating, so she left the baby as instructed and went back into the fields, being sure not to go off too far so she could hear her youngin crying if he did. She had worked most of the day when it started to rain, and not just sprinkle, a downpour. It was raining so hard that the critters started pairing up and heading for the nearest mountain. At first, Z's wife was enjoying the coolness of the rain, but then she remembered Youngin there in the bin underneath the tree. She ran back toward the tree, but the taskmaster blocked the way and she pleaded with him, Please let me get my youngin'. He'll catch his death in this rain. Old taskmaster just cracked his whip and said, get back to work. That little thing is alright. Can't you hear him bawling? And just at that moment, the crying stopped. Z's wife cried out, my baby. Oh Lord, my baby done drowned in that bin. When Z and the others heard her, they all stopped what they were doing and started toward the taskmaster. But before they could reach him, he pulled out his pistol and shot 2 times into the air and yelled, if y'all don't get back into that field, I'll fill your head with lead. As soon as he got them words out, he heard something behind him. It sounded like a tree falling. And there it went again, and then 3 more times. Z's wife backs up in fear, and old taskmaster swung around to take a look, and what he saw struck fear to his heart. The deep cream roots of the ClickBok tree had come up out of the ground, and the ClickBok tree was walking toward him like a man walking in deep mud. And every time she pulled her roots up, she left no trace of her ever having been planted there. Old taskmaster reached for his pistol, and he fired a round smack dab into the heart of the tree, and ClickBok swung her limbs into the air like she was in a windstorm. She took 2 more steps toward him. He fired twice more, and this time ClickBok stumbled backward and let out a mighty cry, a painful one that sounded like a man dying and wood splitting all mixed up. She took another step, this time coming close enough for the old taskmaster to touch. He knew that was a mite too close, so he swung around and aimed at Z's wife and said to the mighty tree, make 1 more step and I'm gonna shoot. ClickBok stopped and stood very still, just like a tree should. Then the taskmaster looked at Z and said, it's your pappy's fault for planting that devil tree. Your wife is dead. And with that, he pulled the trigger and the shot rang out. But ClickBok quickly pushed a root in the way and caught the bullet, letting out a painful cry. Old taskmaster swung around, put the gun right up against ClickBok and pulled the trigger once more. The gun let out a mighty click. ClickBok had been counting on this. She had been counting the shots, and she knew when the bullets would run out. The taskmaster turned to run, but ClickBok reached out with the root, wrapped it around his ankle, and pulled him back. He reached for his Bowie knife and went to cut off her root, but she was too fast for him and wrapped another root around his arm, pulling the knife away. Then she began pulling him into the ground, and he screamed and screamed. It was a horrible scream. One of a dead man. Z's wife covered her ears from the sound, and when ClickBok saw this, she wrapped a root around Taskmaster's mouth. The last thing anyone heard of the old Taskmaster was his muffled cries coming from underneath the earth, and then the ground was still, and the earth went quiet again, and the tree was still and quiet as if it had always been in its new spot. Z's wife heard a whimper in the tree, and when she looked up into its low branches, she saw her youngin' nestled in between them. She ran to climb the tree, but the tree lowered its branches and gently handed youngin' to her. Then ClickBok spread her branches some, standing up tall and proud, and stayed that way to this very day. Some say that now in the fall of the year, if you find yourself seeking shelter from the rain under a big old oak tree, if you listen real close, you can still hear the muffled screams of the old Taskmaster. And as long as the red Alabama dirt is fertile and the rain comes down, the ClickBok tree will always be watching over and protecting her children, now and for many rains to come. So that was the first one, the ClickBok tree, which I really enjoyed. And it's really gonna make mama look at oak trees differently because, girl, is that how you got here? Now, the second one is called the Boo Hag. Let's get into that one. I feel like this one might be my favorite. I don't know. Brother Fisher was a fine-looking man who lived in a tiny community on the Georgia coast. He was well respected in the town for being an honest, hard-working fellow. He wasn't wealthy, but he made a nice enough living doing handiwork for the local townspeople. Emmett was getting close to the marrying age, and every woman in town was jumping at the chance to be his chosen wife. He'd have unexpected visits from different women every day, bearing gifts of fried chicken, gumbo, cakes, cookies, and other delicacies, showcasing their skills in the kitchen, hoping to get to his heart through his stomach. But Emmett had his eyes on a beautifully mysterious young woman who lived alone in a small cabin deep in the marsh. She was an incredibly beautiful woman with long dark hair, smooth skin, and piercing green eyes. But word around town was that she was a little strange, and it was best to stay away from her. Emmett, however, couldn't get the mysterious woman out of his head. What made her even more intriguing was the fact that she would walk through town, turning heads every step, but never did she acknowledge the admiring glances or catcalls from numerous hopeful would-be suitors. In fact, no one in town could ever remember this woman speaking a word to anybody. He often wondered what she sounded like. After months of watching this gorgeous beauty walk through town, Emmett finally worked up enough nerve to call on her at her marsh cabin. His plan was to go fishing one day in a creek that just so happened to be near her home. While out fishing, he conveniently broke his water jug into 100 little pieces. Brother Emmett walked up to the woman's house, took a deep breath, stood up straight, and then knocked on the door. As the door slowly creaked open and the woman peered out, Emmett nervously cleared his parched throat and says, "Excuse me, ma'am," stammering. "My name is Emmett Fisher and I seem to have broken my water jug. Could you please spare me just a cup of water? I'm mighty thirsty." The woman smiled and invited him in without hesitation, her voice even more beautiful and silky than Emmett had imagined. She not only gave Emmett a cup of water, but to his surprise asked him to stay for supper. The food was delicious and the woman waited on Emmett hand and foot. Before he knew it, she invited him to stay for breakfast the next day, then lunch, then dinner again. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, Brother Emmett found himself married to the mysterious woman. After their sudden marriage, Emmett and his bride got along reasonably well for a while. A few months in, he began to notice something peculiar was going on with his new wife. On certain nights, when the clock struck midnight, Emmett would sometimes wake up to find that his wife wasn't in bed with him, nor could she be found anywhere in the house. Emmett began to get worried that she might be seeing someone on the side and confronted her about it, but she would just laugh and reassure him that she was indeed in the house and that he must be having nightmares that she was not. As his wife continues to disappear in the night, she does so more frequently over time. Emmett decides to confide in one of his best friends who had also just gotten married. After hearing Emmett's story, the friend shook his head and said, "Emmett, I hate to say this, but it sounds to me like you might have married yourself a Boo Hag." "A Boo Hag?" Emmett asked. "What's a Boo Hag?" His friend went on to explain. "Well, a Boo Hag is an evil spirit that wakes up at night. She sheds her skin like a snake and flies outside and sucks the blood out of victims from near and far. A Boo Hag is an evil spirit that sits on your chest and steals your voice. A Boo Hag is an evil spirit that sits on your back and rides you all night like a horse until you drop dead." Horrified, Emmett said, "Well, I sure don't want to be married to no Boo Hag if that's what she is. What am I going to do about it?" "The only way to get rid of a Boo Hag is to make sure she can't get back in her skin. When she's gone, take a look in the closet. If you see her skin hanging in there, take it off the hook, fill it with salt and pepper, put it back in the closet, then lay back down and watch." Around midnight that very evening, Emmett rolled over in his bed and found that his wife was gone. He did what his friend told him to do. He got up, went to the closet, and found his wife's skin hanging there cold and slimy to the touch like a lizard skin. He filled it with salt and pepper, hung it back in the closet, then went back to bed and waited for his wife to return. Sure enough, as the sun was about to rise that morning, the door opened and in walked his skinless wife. She opened the closet door, took her skin off the hook, and spoke to it in a gravelly witch-like hiss. "I done been out and had my fun, but I'm back now and my work's all done. So let me in, skin, for the sun's about to crest. You know I'm a Boo Hag and I needs my rest." She then stepped into her skin and fastened it around her body, but after a while that salt and pepper started to itch and burn her real bad. She tried to yank the skin off, but the more she tried, the tighter the skin pressed against her body. She screamed and hollered and jumped around the room, her skin burning her alive. With that, Emmett leapt out of bed and said, "I got you now, you old Boo Hag witch. You fooled me and tricked me into marrying you. So now I'm gonna kill you. Ain't nothing else can be done." He shoved the Boo Hag into a large barrel of tar he had cooking on the hearth, and that Boo Hag burned and melted, her screams filling the air for miles and miles. After she was dead, Emmett, being the handyman that he was, knew exactly what to do with that hot barrel of tar. As the sun rose that morning, he took the tar up to the top of his house and poured himself a brand new roof. So all of you nice, hard-working, fine-looking young men out there, the next time your eye is caught by a beautiful young girl, you better get to know her before you marry her, because one day you too may wake up late in the midnight hour, roll over in bed, and find yourself sleeping next to a Boo Hag. So with the Boo Hag, I kind of feel like I'm on her side. I don't know. I could be biased. I do love a witch. And Mama's was just minding her business. Like, why would you come find me off in the marsh, pursue me and marry me, and then kill me because you don't like what I am? Like, girl, you could have just got your little suitcase and left me in the middle of the night. Like, Ike tried to leave Tina with them kids on that bus. I don't like that he did that to her in the end. You know what I'm saying? My girl didn't deserve that. And she was good to him. All right, this next one is called The Barefoot Woman. This is another favorite. I feel like this one and the Boo Hag is tied for me for number one. And I did my best with all of these visuals. Y'all know I'm still very early in my learning of animation, so don't be trying to judge. So Mama did her best, okay? But I think I did a pretty good job. Now, I know y'all think the devil is a little red man with horns growing out of his head and a red tail with a pitchfork. Well, some folks down in the South say that just ain't so. They say the devil is nothing but an old trickster. That old devil was traveling back and forth all over Alabama tricking folks. What he liked to do the most of all is get loving couples to start fighting with one another. He had husbands and wives and boyfriends and girlfriends fighting all over the place. And once the devil came a-calling, it wasn't long before somebody said the wrong thing to their mate, or somebody forgot an anniversary, or one person cheated on the other. Pretty soon the loving couples would fight and split up, and the devil would strut down the road toward the next happy home, laughing all the way. The devil was doing a pretty good job until he came across a couple of newlyweds down in the valley, and they were so lovey-dovey that the devil couldn't get them to part no matter what he tried. After several days, the devil got real frustrated and just gave up on the two lovebirds. He was walking down the road all discouraged when he ran across a strange woman who was barefoot as an old possum. She looked at him and said, "What's wrong with you, Mr. Devil? You sick or something?" "Nah," said the devil. "I've just been trying to break up that couple down in the valley, but they're so in love I can't get them out." "Shoot, is that all?" she said to him. "Listen, I'll make you a deal. I ain't never had a new pair of shoes before. If you get me a brand new pair of fancy red shoes, I'll part that couple for you. If you can get them to part, I'll get you the most expensive shoes in town," said the devil. "But you don't get them till after you do the job." "No problem," said the barefoot woman. "You just meet me down at the crossroads tomorrow evening with my shoes." The next morning, the barefoot woman baked a mouth-watering apple pie and went up to the newlyweds' home in the valley. The husband was in the field harvesting, his thin shirt soaked with sweat. The barefoot woman asked if she could visit with his wife. She had just moved into the valley and she wanted to get to know her new neighbors. The husband smiled and pointed the barefoot woman toward the door of their home. The wife invited the barefoot woman in and they began to chatter away. The barefoot woman took a seat and began to praise everything in the home as the prettiest this and that she ever saw. The prettiest kitchen, the prettiest dishes, the furniture, even the old roost outside. The wife thanked her for all her kind words and gave her a bucket of freshly picked blackberries from their garden. "Yes, sir, everything in this house is pretty," said the barefoot woman. "But you know what the prettiest thing of all is? You." The wife blushed and said, "Oh no, I'm not the prettiest. My husband is prettier than I am." Yeah, he's pretty all right," said the barefoot woman. "But he'd be even prettier if he didn't have that big old flesh mole on his neck with those ugly black hairs sticking out." The smile briefly faded on the wife's face and she said, "Yeah, I know. He's pretty embarrassed about that, but I'm used to it by now." "You don't have to get used to it," said the barefoot woman. "Why don't you just cut it off?" The wife's jaw dropped. "I couldn't do that," she exclaimed. "He'd bleed to death." "No, he wouldn't," said the barefoot woman. "Here's what you do. Take a razor with you to bed tonight. When he's fast asleep, reach over and whack that thing off real fast. Then dab his neck with some spider webs to stop the bleeding. He won't even know you did it till the next morning, and I'm sure he'll thank you for it." The wife finally agreed to do it, thanking the barefoot woman over and over again for the solution. After telling the wife goodbye, the barefoot woman went outside and visited with the husband, who was still working in the field. "Boy, you sure are a hard worker," said the barefoot woman. "Yes, ma'am," he said back to her. "But I don't mind it at all, because the harder I work, the more I can give to my beautiful wife. She means the world to me." The barefoot woman chuckled and said, "Yeah, I'm sure she does, but from what I hear, she means the world to somebody else too." The husband stopped working and glared at her. "What you mean by that?" he asked. "Well, from what I hear, she's seen another man in town, and one of these nights, if you're not careful, she's gonna do away with you." The husband clenched his fists in rage. "Get off of my property, you lying old hag. Nobody talks about my wife like that." The barefoot woman shrugged her shoulders and turned away. "All I'm saying is, watch out," she said over her shoulder as she walked back down the road. Later that evening, the barefoot woman snuck back down toward the newlyweds' home and hid outside in the smokehouse and watched the couple through the window as they prepared for bed. Even though he loved his wife, the husband had been thinking all day about what the barefoot woman had said. He barely spoke a word to his wife all night and pretended he was asleep when she crawled into bed beside him. After midnight, the wife awoke, saw that her husband was sleeping, then reached under the bed for the razor. She slowly moved toward her husband and positioned the razor by the big old mole on his neck, ready to cut away. Suddenly, the husband opened his eyes and grabbed her wrist with a vice-like grip. "I knew it," he screamed. "That old barefoot woman said you was going to try to kill me so you could be with your new man." "But," protested the wife. "I don't want to hear it," screamed the husband. "Get out of my house, you hear me? Get out, and don't you ever come back." The wife cried, packed her things, and moved away, her heart broken. And the newlyweds never saw each other again. The next morning, the barefoot woman went down to the crossroads to meet the devil just as they had arranged. And when she got there, she found the devil holding out a brand new pair of red shoes to her on the end of a long stick. "I did what you asked. Why you holding those shoes out like that?" "Yeah, you sure did," answered the devil. "But anybody that can cause that much disturbance, I don't want no part of. Here, take your shoes." The barefoot woman then smiled and said, "Mr. Devil, don't you ever underestimate the power of a woman." Then the barefoot woman revealed her true identity to him. She was his wife, Mrs. Devil. And the whole thing was a ploy to get herself a new pair of shoes. I just love that ending. I know that's right, Miss Girl. Get you some new shoes by any means necessary. No, because then she broke up the couple. Girl, you gotta find a new method to get you some new shoes. And last but not least is the white dress. And now that we've gone through all four, I really like this one, but I'm pretty sure that the Boo Hag and the barefoot woman are my favorite too. But anyway, here is the white dress. It was the night before the senior prom, and one girl didn't have a dress to wear. She was poor and lived in a section of town where there were many immigrants from Haiti and other islands in the Caribbean Sea. She had gone to the neighborhood funeral parlor that same day to pay her respects to the remains of an elderly neighbor. And while she was in the funeral home, she had seen a young girl about her age and size lying in a casket in one of the many rooms which she had entered by mistake. Or was it fate? As she looked down at the casket, she noticed that the dress was very pretty and brand new. It had been bought just for the burial. While she was in the room gazing at the dress, the funeral director came in and said that it was time to close the casket. He sealed it with a big key that looked kind of like a wrench and said that the casket would remain closed from then on and that the burial would take place the next morning. After he left, the girl went down the hall to the room where her dead neighbor was laid out. While she was in the room paying her respects, she heard a lot of crying and wailing down the hall. Someone had collapsed with grief in one of the other rooms, and everyone, including the funeral director, ran down the hall to help that family. As the girl ran by the room with the sealed casket, she had an idea. She went into the room, opened the sealed casket with the huge curved wrench, and quickly slid the white dress off of the girl. She put the key back in and sealed the lid again, stuffing the white dress into her school bag. Then she slipped out past the room where all the crying was coming from, unseen. The next night, she put the dead girl's white dress on and went to the dance. And as she danced with several different boys she knew, her joints began to kind of stiffen. As time went on, her muscles began to stiffen also, causing her to walk and dance awkwardly. She thought maybe there was something wrong with the dress, so she went into the girls' restroom and slipped into a stall. She took off the dress, searching all over it, but couldn't find anything wrong, so she put it back on. As she danced, she became colder and stiffer until she was as stiff as a board. The ambulance was called and she was rushed to the hospital where the doctors pronounced her dead, but she was alive. She could hear every word everyone said and see everything that was happening. She just couldn't move or speak. Soon she was lying in that same funeral parlor with her family and friends coming by and crying. She tried to move or cry out, but she couldn't. The funeral director came in and closed the lid on her casket for the final time, and the next day the casket was taken to the graveyard. She could hear the grave diggers working, preparing her grave and chatting. "Did you hear what happened at the funeral home this morning?" said one of them. "No, what?" said the other as they both threw shovels full of dirt onto her casket. A young mortician's assistant heard a knocking sound in one of the caskets. Well, he opened it up and a young girl in a slip came out. She said she'd been the victim of a voodoo ritual. Someone had given her a dress dusted with that zombie powder, so she seemed dead when she wasn't. Huh? Said the first gravedigger. I wonder what happened to that dress. And then the girl couldn't hear anything else. I feel like my girl could have been saved. Like, granted, she stole, but that's a big price to pay for swiping a dress that nobody was gonna use again. I'm just saying. I kind of wish they could have, got it up off my girl before she got buried in the dirt like that, but I guess, child. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you guys like these? Would you like for me to share more? I'm really looking forward to hearing your feedback or reading your feedback down below. As always, I appreciate you so much for spending your time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace.